I need to consolidate some services and I might need your help.
Are these financial services or legal services?
Into one affordable monthly payment by any chance?
One affordable large monthly payment. No, I have realized that I'm spending a little bit too much on internet services, as in VPSs and stuff. And I haven't been choosy enough with the pricing. So I went and found somewhere that was a bit cheaper that could provide me with internet services. But that means I'm going to have a new server somewhere and I need to migrate some existing stuff in there. And I can't quite decide how to do this. And I might need a bit of your help to convince me. Okay?
Okay. So you're actually not talking about where, but how you want to run these services. Is that the gist of this?
Yes, I'll outline what those services are, right?
Okay.
So my own personal website is on a Bitfolk VPS that I've had for like a decade or more. Mm-hmm. It's 1804, 32-bit. I can't really upgrade it anymore. It's running out of space constantly. I need to do something. Yes, I could pay for a new VPS from Bitfolk, and I love Bitfolk and I want to support him, but I can't justify that because I also have a server at Linode running what I call Popey Spades. It's Open Spades, an online game. It's running a couple of servers, but it's the tiniest of tiny Linodes. Those aren't the problem. The big problem is Ubuntu.social, of course, which is a chunky box at Linode. And Linode is relatively expensive. And I've shopped around and I've found something cheaper. And it's a dedicated box at Hetzner, Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Now, brief sidebar. Signing up for Hetzner was a challenge in and of itself. You go to their website and there's loads and loads of options for all different sizes of machines, right? And the machines are either in Finland or Germany or somewhere else. I don't really care. It's the internet. It's all the same. And I clicked a button and was like, buy that, please. And it said, okay, you need to sign up. So I sign up. It says, okay, you need to put in a payment method. So I put in my credit card details. And as soon as I did that, it said, we have detected some kind of bizarre behavior and we've deleted your account.
Wow.
Oh.
Yes. So as soon as I put in my credit card details, I was persona non grata. And I thought, well, that's not a good start. It was all resolved by shouting at them on Twitter. And they DM'd me and I went through their customer support and told them I am a genuine human being who wishes to purchase services from you. Even after this, I still want to purchase services from you. Sidebar, because you're quite cheap. And so I have a server and it's a chunky box. It's cheaper than everything. And if I consolidate all these things together, now that's the end of the sidebar. I've got a box.
Okay, so you say you've got a box. I think you said you'd got like 2 VPSs and a chunky box. So were any of those bare metal? And is this new thing a big VPS or is it actual server?
It's an actual server.
Aha.
The VPSs, 2 of them, the Bitfolk VPS is a Zen domain, I think is the implementation, but it doesn't really matter. It's just I've got a small part of a small box. Mm-hmm. And the Linode Popey Spades is like the smallest shared machine you can get. It's tiny. It's like a gig of RAM or something. It's super tiny.
Right.
Those aren't the real problems. The big one is I need to move the whole Mastodon thing. Now, I have moved Mastodon in the past. You may remember it used to run on a server in my office, and I used Nginx on the outside world to proxy into and tunnel into, and it worked fine for a small number of users, right? Where small number is 1, me. And now there are more users and I want to put it on something a bit beefy. Now, I could migrate the same way that I did last time, and that is hand wavy, rsync all the files across, set up the config, install all the stuff, shut it down at the old place, back up everything, do one last rsync, back up the database, restore the database, make sure the config works, yada, yada, yada. You know, it's not hard to move services from one place to another. It's manual, and I've got documentation, and I've done it before, and it isn't like super hard, but it's time consuming. But what I would also like to put on that box is my personal website and Popey Spades. And all of that is currently on the, in inverted commas, bare metal. There's no containerization of any kind. Now, I don't like Docker.
We know this.
Yes, you're aware. You are aware, dear listener, that I'm not a fan of the Dockers. And so I'm not quite sure what to do. Should I do that? Should I create these containers and put everything in its own container?
It's what I would do, but it depends on why you don't like it.
And other container runtimes are available.
Yeah. Is it that you don't like containers, or is it specifically something about Docker that you don't like doing stuff with it and you'd be happy building a container in a similar way but running it on something else?
I don't know. It's the mental model of Docker is a bit weird for me because it's kind of inside a thing that's a bit like a VM, but it's not a full VM. And I've had problems with it in the past where I couldn't quite grok what was inside and what was outside.
Yeah, I certainly had that problem at first, yes.
Right. So there's a bit of a learning curve there. And, part of me thinks, Alan, just man up. It's 2023. Yeah. Just use Docker.
I mean, it doesn't get around a lot of the problem of having to migrate the data because the data that you'd be thinking about is the stuff that doesn't live inside the container. So you still need somewhere sort of permanent for the data to live as well, which then gets mounted on the container. So even if you have the software nicely packaged and easy to deploy, you still have to think about where is all of the stuff going to live that it uses.
So that's interesting. I hadn't thought that. I thought it would all be inside this box, inside a box somewhere in Germany. But if that's the case, then I don't really see the advantage because I'm already pretty okay with administering Mastodon and Postgres and all the other bits and bobs and, Ruby and everything. The thing is that they're not containerized.
Yeah.
And so, I will have a web server running my personal website, which is just a static website. It's only Hugo. But then there's this Mastodon thing on the same box, but then there's also OpenSpades, which actually is running as snaps.
Right.
I built a snap of OpenSpades. So those are containerized,
yes.
The games.
Yeah.
So the advantage that you get there of if you move them all to containers is you don't risk them accidentally stomping all over each other when you're upgrading things or installing things. Like if you've got the Mastodon stuff all in its own container, you've got another container which is just a web server, and then you've got something possibly snaps, possibly another container of some sort with the OpenSpade stuff in, and you don't have to worry about them conflicting with each other.
Yeah.
While that's true, they already aren't going to much because my own website is all static HTML and CSS and images and stuff, and that's not hard work. And there's nothing active in there. There's no PHP or anything. And OpenSpades, like I said, is inside a snap. And so everything that is to do with it is inside a confined directory.
Yeah.
I'm finding it really hard to justify the effort, but I know everyone is shouting at me, you should do it. And I can hear it over the internet, people telling me I should use containers. It's the right practice to do. But yeah, I'm finding it really hard to justify it.
I have a sort of kind of middle ground for you. So, first of all, I'm going to say anyone that's listening to this and they're about to send us feedback and the words Kubernetes are in that feedback, don't bother. Alan isn't going there, right? This is not the direction of travel we are headed in. So
no, I'm not spinning up 20 boxes for Kubernetes. No.
Hyperscale OpenSpades.
But what you might like is if you use Proxmox, which is the operating system that runs on the Metal, and it has got a web front end, which enables you to create, visualize, and you can deploy in the usual way containers. I'm going to say Docker containers, but, OCI containers using Docker or Podman or whatever, and also virtual machines. So you could use something like that because I think that would help overcome this sort of inception visualization sort of block that you have with what is this thing and where is it? If you can actually see through a management interface, here are all of my containers that are running and this is what they are. And here are also the virtual machines. And I would also say that whilst, yes, containers are definitely the sort of de facto, it's okay to use virtual machines if you find that easier. And in some respects, for something like Mastodon, that may be advantageous because you could define the size and scope of the virtual machine instance more easily in order to constrain it so it doesn't overwhelm other things that you're running on your box.
That is a very fair point. I could rein it in a little bit with disk space and give it only a small number of CPUs, for example.
Yeah.
Because it is quite a beefy box. It's got like more CPUs than I need. And that's actually something I should consider. I think what I need to do is make some notes and maybe put it in a blog post and let people know what I'm thinking, and then solicit the opinions of our listeners and anyone else who passes by and tells me I'm doing it wrong and I should do it differently.
I'm sure people will have opinions. This is the internet after all.
Oh, good. Linux Matters is part of the Late Night Linux family. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us and the rest of the Late Night Linux team using the PayPal or Patreon links at linuxmatters.sh/support. For $5 a month on Patreon, you can enjoy an ad-free feed of our show, or for $10 get access to all the Late Night Linux shows ad-free. You can get in touch with us via email, show@linuxmatters.sh, or chat with other listeners in our Telegram group. All the details are at linuxmatters.sh/contact.
There's a major Moodle release coming up next month, and at work I've been making some of my weightiest contributions so far to the upstream Moodle project. And when I mentioned this in our Telegram channel, someone suggested that I talk a bit about what the process of contributing to Moodle looks like. So I thought I might have a bit of a chat about that and give people some perspective on contributing to a large and established open source project.
Is the first question, what on earth is Moodle?
Now that is a very good question. So Moodle, you will probably have encountered it if you've been to university or possibly a college in the past decade or so. It's a virtual learning environment is the generic term, VLE. It is a thing that provides web pages for teachers to put learning content on and run online activities with their students. The idea of it in its conception was it was built around this idea of social constructivism, which is where people learn together and teach each other. So it's very focused to collaborative online activities, but it also works for dumping a load of PDFs on a web page and things like that.
That's been my experience of VLEs. My son would get told, your work for the week is on the VLE. This was, during the event when VLEs were coming into their own quite a bit. And it was just a dumping ground for PowerPoints and links and stuff like that. It's got to be more than that, right?
Yeah, Moodle is a very powerful and varied and extensible platform. These days, it's referred to more as an online learning platform rather than specifically as a VLE. It's designed to hook into other things, and there's a lot you can do with it, but that's a whole other segment, I think, on what you can do with Moodle. But it's been around a long time. It's over 20 years old. It was written in PHP 4 originally, I think, which was before PHP had things like object-oriented programming and the concepts we're familiar with today. And it's still mostly written in PHP with quite a lot of JavaScript, somewhere in the region of 1 million lines of code across those two languages. So it's quite big, and it can be quite daunting to start hacking away on. But the interesting thing is, because it's written in PHP, if you're running it, you've also got all the source code. And if you want to make a change, you can just hack on a file and reload the page, and there it is. So what you find in the Moodle community quite a lot is that quite a few people who are developers used to be teachers who used Moodle and then wanted to make it better and were able to do that quite easily.
And for an established project of this size, have we got any idea sort of what the active number of developers contributing to Moodle currently is?
Oh, that's a good question. I know that in terms of the sort of rate of change, there's somewhere around 40 issues are integrated each week. In terms of the actual number of developers actively involved, it's not that easy to put a number on that, I don't think. Because as well as the core project, you've also got a community of plugins around them and people who are active on those and people working in-house on it. But there's quite a few people working on it, let's put it that way. The conferences are always well attended by developers.
And you've contributed to this before, but this, what you're talking about today, is a more significant contribution.
Yeah. So my first job with Moodle was about 15 years ago, and I did my first contribution, which was a one-line change to fix a CSS bug, although the bug was actually in PHP code. That's another story. I made my first one-line change then. But yes, these are much more significant. So there's an area of Moodle called the question bank, which is how it manages questions used for quizzes. And it has some quite advanced features for that, but the UI was looking a bit dated. So my work recently has been around refreshing that and making it a bit more modern and a bit more usable and accessible and things like that. You know, to have some of the features you expect when you see a table on a page in an interface. You expect to be able to do things like resize the columns and move things around and filter the results and stuff like that. So I've made two fairly significant contributions in that regard. And
so was this stuff that you decided needed to be done, or someone else decided needed to be done and you went, I'll grab that?
So actually, interestingly, this is a bit of a unique source for this contribution. It's actually come from a group of universities who got together and said, we'd like to make this area better. And so they clubbed together some money and did some design work, and then basically hired my company to do the development work, because we're a Moodle partner company and we've got a lot of experience working with Moodle with our clients. And if people need Moodle development done, we can do it. And in this case, they wanted us to do the development for them, but contribute it upstream rather than giving it to them in-house, as it were.
Were you initially giving it to them so they could iterate on the design or work on it with you and then go upstream?
Yes. So it's been a sort of, I've been working with them throughout the process and getting early feedback. It's been an agile development process.
Oh dear.
For your buzzword bingo cards, which, you know, stuff like this is generally best done that way anyway, just because the way that you think something's going to work never ends up being the way it actually works, and what you specify can always end up being wildly different from what you decide is going to work in the end. So it's always good to work that way if you can. So yeah, I wanted to talk a bit about, once you've got your thing made, how do you actually get that into a project like Moodle? So Moodle has a bug tracker, which is Jira or Jira, however you like to say it, which has been quite heavily configured, let's say, for Moodle's purposes. So works quite well for their workflow. And it's been that way since I've been involved. I don't know if they ever had something different before. And as with most projects, it's using Git for version control. I think I started just as they were transitioning to Git. They previously used CVS, which was fun. But fortunately, I never really had to learn that. So once you've got your bug, you set up your local development environment and fix the issue. So it's PHP. So you set up a LAMP stack locally, and whichever text editor or IDE you prefer, write your code. And there's a coding style which you follow. There's tools for making sure you follow the coding style. As part of a development that you're contributing upstream, you're also expected to write and run automated tests. So there's unit tests which test the PHP code in isolation, but there's also a tool more widely known as Cucumber, but the PHP implementation is called Behat, which actually runs a web browser and executes functions within the web interface and tests that it does what you're expecting it to do. So you need to write tests like that to prove that what you're doing is doing what you're saying it's doing. So once you've got your code ready and you've got all of this done, you then push it up to GitHub and you link it to the issue on the tracker. So they don't do pull requests via GitHub's pull request method. They do it separately. And when you push it up to GitHub, it will run using GitHub Actions. It runs a bunch of these automated checks, runs all of the unit tests across all of Moodle, which makes sure that you don't break other things, which is a really important part of writing these automated tests, because you're basically saying, once you've contributed it, the community is maintaining this now. And part of your responsibility there is making sure that people know if something they're going to do is going to break it. There's also some checks on the tracker side to make sure that you've done everything there that you're meant to do, like writing a test script that explains how this is going to be tested. And once that's all good and you've got the green light, you then submit it for peer review.
So you said you don't create a pull request. So I imagine you've forked the Moodle repository
Yes.
from GitHub to your own GitHub org. And that brings over all of the CI/CD workflows and test infrastructure. So when you push your code to your fork, all of that test infrastructure runs.
Yes.
And you link from your project that you have forked to the issue tracker, and that triggers the link, the awareness, the notification that you are working on something over here and you intend for it at some point to be brought into the main project.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they also have some separate CI stuff and their Behat test runner, which is all separate from GitHub, because that's a massive thing running on Jenkins somewhere, which uses the tracker to say, these are the branches I need to test against.
Okay.
So peer review in the Moodle community can basically be done by anyone. And of course, when something can be done by anyone, that means it's often done by no one. This is where it helps to work for a company which employs other Moodle developers. But generally, you have to go out, unless someone is actively looking for this to be fixed. You need to go out and find someone who's going to peer review this for you. But it doesn't have to be someone specific with specific credentials. It just has to be someone who knows the process and is willing to follow it for you. They do publish guidelines and a checklist of the sort of things that you're checking. And it's, things like, has the coding style been followed, which should be automatically checked, looking out for any security issues, looking out for any efficiency issues, making sure that the test script that you've written is sufficient and covers everything, and the automated tests cover everything, because it's fine saying, I've written a test script, but there's a difference between writing a test script and writing a test script that tests things well, and all of these sorts of things. And once they've done that, they can stick the ticked off checklist on the issue and say, this is now ready for integration. And integration in Moodle is a second round of review, which is done by a member of Moodle HQ, which is the affectionate name for Moodle's main sponsor company. They are the ones who run all of this infrastructure. They own the Moodle trademark, and they employ the Moodle core developers, who are the people who provide the integration review. So aside from this high level peer review, they're there to really look into your code and say, is this of sufficient quality to go into Moodle, and is it a good fit? Is this, following the architectural direction that we're going in? Is this following the latest best practices that we're adhering to? And is this something that we definitely want in Moodle core as opposed to as a Moodle plugin?
So those conversations don't necessarily happen up front then. This is sort of after you've done the work. Is there somewhere you can discuss like ideas for changes you want to make, so you don't work on something and go through the first two steps of contribution and then get told, actually, no, we're not interested?
Yes. And it has been a bit of a bumpy road with some of the stuff I've been working on recently in that regard. But yes, there's the Moodle forums. There is the issue tracker where you can discuss things up front before you start working on them. And there's the Moodle Matrix channel where you can discuss things with other developers.
Did anything get rejected, or you have to rework anything?
Yes, I've been doing quite a lot of rework on one of them, because basically it wasn't following there's been a lot of work into the user experience, consistency and modernization of Moodle. And some of the work I'd done was not well aligned with the direction that was going in. So after some conversations, we agreed that I'd sort of, the Moodle HQ UX team gave me some designs to adjust my work to follow better what they're going to be doing in the future, so that we don't end up with two completely different things in different parts of the system.
So your work has landed now?
It is in the process of landing. One of the big changes has landed. It's in the process of landing. And the release is, I think, just at the start of October. So we're in code freeze now, which means everything's been submitted to integration. And yeah, my second big change is going through the integration process as we record, which is on the 5th of September. I should just put that note in there. So depending on when you listen to this, it may already be out. It will hopefully be out in Moodle 4.3.
Nice. I guess the more important question is, are your customers happy?
I think so. They can email in and let us know if they're not.
I purchased one of those refurbished Steam Decks from Valve, and after 2 weeks of ownership, I'm here to tell you, if you're retro gaming on the Steam Deck, you're doing it wrong, and we're here to tell you how to do it right.
We are here to tell you, are we?
Yeah, I'm totally throwing you under the bus with this one, Alan. So, I finally capitulated. I'm a fully signed up host to the Linux Matters podcast, for I now too own a Steam Deck. That seems to be about 60% of our content, so I felt I should get one so I can join in the fun. So here we are with my first Steam Deck segment for the podcast.
Welcome to the cult.
Yes.
Yes. So I will say, if anyone's wondering about refurbished Steam Decks, it's just like a proper not refurbished one. Everything appears absolutely brand new. The one difference is that all of the little boxes that it comes in all have the words refurbished, actually in print, properly made, not stuck on with stickers. It's all very professional.
It did look just like a brand new device. Like,
yeah.
I saw when you unpacked it, it was like no different than mine.
Yeah, identical, other than the addition of the word refurbished on all of the paper pullouts and all the rest of it. And when people cottoned on to the fact that I'd got a Steam Deck, the first recommendation I got from several people was, you should install EmuDeck, because that's how you do retro gaming on the Steam Deck. And I was going to resist getting into retro gaming on the Steam Deck because I was going to keep it for PC gaming. But then, Alan, you went and found something and you totally ruined that for me.
I apologise. I have not been a fan of EmuDeck ever. All due respect to the developers, it's a bag of spanners and I don't like it, and I don't like the way it installs. And I recently nuked my Steam Deck. I wiped the OS completely and started again. And when I started again, I thought, I could probably play some retro stuff on here. Hey, what's this? This is not EmuDeck. This is something else completely different. And so I found a thing called Retro Deck, and I installed that and then mentioned it to Martin, and he won't shut up about it now.
Yes. So Retro Deck is what I'm here to tell you about, and it is fabulous. So there's a few things I really like about Retro Deck. The first is, it's not a bag of spanners. It's distributed as a flat pack, which you can find in FlatHub. So everything is integrated in this one bundle. It is all of the things you need to run emulators, and one install and you're done. And it's all isolated together there. So that's really tasty. I like that a lot. But then the actual architecture for how this works currently, and also where they're going, I really like. The first thing I like is it's really easy to use. Unlike some of the sort of emulation framework platforms which expose the RetroArch user interface, which I am not a fan of. It overwhelms me. I don't understand what all the options are, and also I don't really want to know what all the options are. I just want to play some games. And Retro Deck does that. It just shows you the games you can play and hides all of that complicated stuff away underneath. So in terms of how it presents, it's kind of like a Netflix-like user interface, which gets better when you download metadata, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's very easy to use. I haven't needed to dive into the underpinnings of RetroArch and all the rest of it. All of the stuff that I've needed to change has been exposed through its own interface.
I have played with EmuDeck, and I agree with your sentiments, but one of the things that I do like about it is that it includes a tool which finds all of the stuff you've got set up with EmuDeck and adds it into your Steam launcher interface. And at that point, you just go into Steam and you say, launch this, and it's just like you're playing a game through Steam. You don't feel like you're going into EmuDeck to play it. Does Retro Deck do the same sort of thing, or is it all through its own interface?
I don't think it does, but I don't know for sure because I haven't looked for that feature.
I don't think it does, and I don't want it to do that.
And I agree with Alan.
I don't want my Steam cluttered up with a whole bunch of spanners. I want the one thing to launch it. And then I've got a view on all of the emulators and all the games that I want to play. And it was the whole integrating all of these little spanners in Steam UI that really put me off EmuDeck. And
interesting.
That's the thing I love about RetroDeck. You launch one thing and you're now in all the emulators and you can just go into each one.
Is that launcher launched through the Steam interface?
Yeah, it's add one item and you only have one thing to add to Steam and you're done.
Yeah. So there is one game in Steam called RetroDeck, and then it's a beautiful launcher, and it really is very beautiful. So some other things that I like about it is this was an interesting one. When you push the two buttons to quit a game, for whatever reason, when you start that game at some point in the future, it automatically creates an autosave point so that when you start that game next time, you're immediately, bang, back in the game exactly where you left it, which took me by surprise a couple of times till I realised it was doing that. And I like that because when I just do pick up and play, this is great for, right, I'm going to put this down. I may come back to it in a couple of days' time, but I can pick up and carry on from where we were. And then it also has retro achievements, which I've never dabbled with before, but I can totally see that I could become a retro achievement hunter as a result of how nicely integrated that is into RetroDeck, including like notification toasts appearing over the game as you hit certain achievements.
So that hooks into various retro games and tracks when you do certain things in them.
Yeah.
That's quite neat.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty cool. Not every game is supported because obviously there's tens of thousands of retro games that you can lob on these things, but all the big ones tend to have some kind of achievements, and it's quite a lot of fun actually doing that.
Yeah, the user interface that you've mentioned that's very beautiful. It's based on Emulation Station, or a fork of Emulation Station, because I think that died off at some point.
Yeah.
Which is the same UI that I've got on my Piecade, my tabletop Pi arcade thing. Emulation Station's been around a while, but this, with themes and stuff, it's taken it to the next level. It's so nice to use.
Yeah, so it uses Emulation Station Desktop Edition, and the RetroDeck team are actually contributing RetroDeck specific features and changes to that project that is only exposed when it's running on the RetroDeck. So they're sort of working in tandem. So it's all very seamlessly integrated. And this is one of the things I like about like the way the project is being led and the direction it's headed in, because it has got some rough edges. They signpost those rough edges and make it very clear. This is the way it is right now. For example, there's some Zenity pop-ups and things like this at the moment. They fully intend to integrate into either their own UI or into the Emulation Station desktop. But it's all been very thoughtfully put together. And the project itself is still beta. So whilst I've had no issues running this, I'm by no means a hardcore retro gamer. I don't know what shouldn't be working or what platforms aren't enabled, for example. I know that their intention is to enable everything that RetroArch supports. I don't think everything is right now. But I like the way they're sort of signposting where they're headed with this in the future. And here's one of the things I absolutely love about this is because it's a flat pack, you can run it on desktop Linux too. So actually, I've been mostly running it on my desktops because I can. And I've got sync things sat in the background, automatically syncing my game library between all of my machines that have RetroDeck installed, and all of my configuration and save states and metadata and all of that stuff is consistent across all of these devices, including the Steam Deck, because I did a little hack and I got zero tier working on the Steam Deck. So all of this synchronization works between the Steam Deck and my desktop machines. So I can manage my library in one place, one virtual place, and all of these machines pick it up.
You mentioned briefly the artwork. There's a whole bunch of stuff to do with scraping as well.
There is.
That you showed me, yeah.
Yeah, so there's two providers that provide artwork and metadata. One I think is called Screen Scraper. It's a French website, and there's the other one, which is the TV database. I'd never used this French one. I've signed up and I'm using that. It's quite slow, but it gives you a really great results because it gives you videos and all of the cover art and all of the history behind all of the games. So it very much is like Netflix. When you go to a game, it has a rolling video. The theme that I'm using has like arcade cabinets that match the originals, or TV sets that are era accurate for the game's consoles. And it's just a very beautiful experience, and it invites you to want to play these games, because each time you switch to the next one, it's colourful and sounds great, looks amazing, and you just want to play. So there it is. It's RetroDeck. It's retrodeck.net. We'll have links to all of this in the show notes, including my instructions on how to install Zero Tier on the Steam Deck, which is also a nice generic way to have persistent software installations from the Arch repos on a Steam Deck that survive SteamOS updates.